According to the psychological and scientific model, the majority of people in their waking day, in a normal day, spend about 70% of their time living in stress. And living in stress is living in survival. And the actual definition of stress is when your body's knocked out of homeostasis. Stress is when your body's knocked out of balance. The stress response is what your body innately does to return itself back to order. You have three types of stress. You have physical stress like trauma, injuries, accidents, falls. You have chemical stress like bacteria, viruses, blood sugar levels, heavy metals in food, hangovers, whatever. And you have emotional stress like traffic jams, internet connections, second mortgages, single parenting, 401ks, family tragedies. All of those things knock the brain and body out of balance. Now, all organisms in nature can adapt to short-term stress. A pack of coyotes chases a deer in the forest. The deer outruns the coyotes, the stress is over, the deer returns back to homeostasis and it grazes again. The event is over. When the deer perceives a threat in its external environment, it turns on a primitive nervous system called the fight or flight nervous system. And that autonomic nervous system, that sympathetic nervous system, begins to mobilize enormous amounts of energy for some threat in the external environment. Now, deer has all its physiology changed, all the blood is sent to the extremities, heart rate increases, respiratory rate increases, pupils dilate. The 1,300 chemicals that are created in a matter of seconds is to cause the deer to survive in some difficult condition. Now, human beings have the same mechanisms, and when we perceive a threat in our external environment, like a lion, we are going to run or fight or freeze. But if you've had problems with your coworker, or you've had a very difficult experience with your mother-in-law, the moment you perceive your mother-in-law or your coworker, you have a past experience with them, you're going to turn on the same primitive nervous system just like you're being chased by a lion. So what was once highly adaptive now becomes very maladaptive, because when you're mobilizing all of that energy, you are going to operate in very predictable ways. You're going to be an amped up animal with a big memory bank. So that your blood flow is going to go to the hindbrain and away from the forebrain, which means you're going to react instead of think, rationalize. But human beings, the privilege of being a human being is that we can make thought more real than anything else. That's the privilege. So then you can begin to forecast some future worst case scenario. And you can attend to that thought to the exclusion of everything else. And you can focus on it to such a degree that you will begin to anticipate the event and produce the same chemicals as if you were in that experience, and you're knocking your brain and body out of balance just by thought alone. You can begin to unfold some past bitter memory that's tattooed in the recesses of your gray matter, and like magic you can bring it to life, and in that moment it's real. And you will produce the same chemistry in your brain and body as if that event occurred. And your body, as the unconscious mind, is literally living that experience. So then, when we're living by the hormones of stress, and you turn on that stress response, and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for some disease. Because no organism in nature can tolerate living in emergency mode for extended periods of time. So if 70% of the time a person's living in survival, living in stress, in survival, what we do in order to survive is we are going to select the worst case scenario. And we are going to begin to plan our behaviors and our emotions in that experience, because anything less than the worst case scenario means we have better chances of survival. So we plan for the worst, we emotionally embrace it, and anything less means we can survive. So out of the infinite potentials in the quantum field, anxiety really represents a poor imagination, but it's highly adaptive if you're living in survival, because you got to get ready for that. So 70% of the time, people are selecting the worst case event in their life and emotionally embracing it, and they're programming their autonomic nervous system into a very specific destiny. And it turns out if you keep doing that and you create the emotions of fear and worry and anxiety, and you do that for 10 years or 5 years or 3 years, your body is going to unconsciously become programmed to fear. And it's going to have a panic attack without you. Try as you may with your conscious mind to control it, you've programmed it subconsciously. And now the body as the mind is running the show. So the hormones of stress create the emotions of anger, of aggression, of hostility, of violence, of frustration, of hatred, of fear, of anxiety, of guilt, of shame, of hopelessness, of powerlessness, depression. Those are all chemicals that are derived from the hormones of stress. And when we live by the hormones of stress, we become very selfish. Why? Because when you're in survival, you got to take care of the self. Your attention is on your body, right? Your attention is on your external environment. There's predators out there. The rush of adrenaline causes the senses to become heightened, and you're a materialist, and you're trying to predict the future because there's better chances of survival if you can predict the future based on the past. And when that occurs then, over time, the body begins to break down, because it's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress downregulate genes to create disease in the long term. So if you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, and the hormones of stress can make you sick, then your thoughts can literally make you sick. So the question is, if your thoughts can make you sick, is it possible then that your thoughts can make you well?